my fourth data activity, hang on, we're almost to the end because there's only 5. My fourth data activity is who's in the box. I actually think this one has great bang for the buck to be done, to make sure you do this before you do the portfolio task. Remember, in Who's in the Box, what we do is I get some little clothespin people, and I put them in little costumes, and we put them in shoe boxes. And so when you are playing Who's in the Box, you get handed a shoe box with a little card on the top that says, 10 people, average weight, 120 pounds. And you also get a spreadsheet. So over time, I just want to give you some game time on working a spreadsheet. In the spreadsheet, what you need to do is to create a column for each of the people you've been told are in your box. So in the example I'm working, 10 little clothespins on the box, you would create a 10-column spreadsheet, and you're required to fill out 10 rows. And the rows are going to be attributes about each of your little clothespin people. The first row, just so grading gets easier, the first row has to be whatever piece of information you were given on the index card I handed to you when you got your box. So in my example, it was the weight. So you would create a row all that for all your people, give them a numeric value for weight. Then let the students just be in total free choice on what other 9 rows they want to create. Give them some ideas, like give your people a name and tell me what their gender is and what their occupation is and their favorite food. But this is their choice to fill out. So what they are going to do is to start building up their content, their domain understanding of what data is. And to do that, you need some understanding of what some of the key concepts are. Now, I know you math people out there are going to roll your eyes at this, but don't hit me. We are pressed for time in the CS Principles class. I wish we could run this for multiple years. We could really make a dent in building up computational thinkers, but don't forget, you have a lot of content to cover. So I have painfully kind of sifted through years of teaching data, and I think it's important to convey to the students, to teach to the students that a key activity that you engage in when you work with data, I call it tickling your data set. And there's 2 activities that you engage in. One is a formal kind of tickle, we'll talk about that. And then the other is a very creative, informal kind of tickle, and we'll talk about that one too. When I teach my students how to do a formal tickle, what I want them to do with this Who's in the Box is to build up their just a qualitative understanding of some key quantitative terms in data science. In particular, I need to tell you that my favorite student is not that math student. It's that student that's checked out of all STEM curriculum, that doesn't have a math backbone, thinks they hate math. And what I try to do is to make these ideas so exciting, and I strip them of a math backbone, and I hope I bring them along. So what I want to do here is for the formal tickle, I want my students to know, now don't tell them this is math and statistics, but there's no need to ruin the fun for them here. Between us girls, what we're talking about is univariate and multivariate stats. Now don't roll your eyes at me, because listen, I'm going to keep this really, really light. Univariate stats, you got a little bit of Latin, I'm sure you do. Uni is just singular. And multivariate, I would be looking at 2 pieces of information at a time. So here, I just want to start in the shallow end of the pool, so I'm going to do some univariate stats. And in the world of univariate stats, if I give you a world, the world that's contained in this little shoebox, or any other sample you might, or population you might consider. Let's use the word population there. There are two key kinds of measures you would take to just sniff around your data and see what you got going in the box. The two kinds of measurements you would want to take are measurements of central tendency and measurements of dispersion. Measurements are central tendency. Let's get down and dirty with our little box. What you're looking at there is how close, how identical are your little clothespin people. When you look at measures of dispersion, you're looking at how spread out, how different they are. And I have my students do the following measures. For central tendency, I want them to do mean, median, and mode. There's no algebra involved in doing those. They are arithmetic. Keep the number of peeps in your little shoebox small so that your students can do those fairly easily. They can check their work. I think it's even okay if they use the built-in functions in whatever spreadsheet tool you're using, as long as they have a little sanity check of, you know, I think the number is going to be somewhere near 120. Then the measure of dispersion that I have them do is the range. Again, that one's easy, but standard deviation, that's where I draw the line and go, look, for our purposes in the CS Principles class, speak to what standard deviation does. It kind of takes an average of the ways your little clothespin people differ, but then I have them use the built-in function. Isn't it wonderful that we live in a time of computers and our tool set is richer? So I freely admit that this is a thrifted curriculum, but you know, that's one of the hardest things we do as teachers is to decide what to put in, how much depth we give the coverage, and the opportunity cost about what we left out. But I'm really convinced that the students, the CS Principles students, need some trafficking with those key ideas. So that's sort of a formal tickle that allows you to look at data set without examining the individual members and just kind of sniff around what you got going on in the box. Don't forget the cardboard box is sealed. The students have filled out a little spreadsheet about the clothespin people. And the first time through, at least this has happened with me, every time I do this, the first time through, if I say there's 10 clothespin people and their average weight is 120 pounds, when your students fill out their spreadsheet, they will say every single clothespin person weighs 120 pounds. You'll see some growth or perhaps some advanced skills when they will gravitate around 120, one's 118, one's 125, yada, yada, yada. But I rig the box that I give them so that when they open the box, they get a little card that tells them inside, please find, and your 10 little peeps, 9 of them were starved 10-pound zombies, and the 10th person was this really fat honkin' sumo warrior. So this gives you the idea of why we need to do both central tendency and dispersion to try to make sure our high-level view of who's in the box it doesn't skew, that we take into account that the data measures can get thrown. So there's lots of teaching moments here. Look at how abstraction turned these people, these little clothespin people, into one piece of data, how much they weigh, etc. And then we can start talking about the idea of scaling. So what if I allowed you a little peep inside the box, but for only 3 seconds? Would things be different? Would you be more or less likely to make a mistake? What if instead of 10 little people in a box, I gave you a really big box with lots of little clothespin people? Now you can't look at each one individually, and so you start to see the power or the challenges, what happens when you take something to scale. So all of that was the formal tickle of when you're handed a data set, you know, how do you kind of walk around it and sniff it? The second part for me is actually even more fun. I call it the informal tickle. Don't forget that they produced an artifact, a spreadsheet, where they filled out a row for each of their people with 10 different attributes for each little clothespin person. And what I ask them to do, they are not allowed to run any numbers on this, they just eyeball the data, and I want them to guess at 3 possible relationships that might be in the data. So for example, maybe they say, I don't see a single pattern. Okay, that may be legitimate. They may not know how to find a pattern, or they may not have introduced any. But hopefully, eventually, if you require 3 and you do this multiple times, you will get an answer like, 2 of the people liked rap music and they also were boys. So I would be willing to make a prediction that it is more likely, if you like rap music, you are more likely to be a boy than a girl. I'm not asking them to at all test this idea. What I want them to get practice with is the because. Because I saw that for both rap people, there was an entry in the gender column for boys, there might be a relationship. Because I saw weight of 120 repeated 9 times, so it's just the because of their observation. And you will see growth if you do a pre and post test, just bullet point kind of thing. Again, you're looking for mastery of these concepts. By the way, I give minimal extra credit if a student produces an entire box kit for me with an index card that the students will receive with the box. And I also give minimal extra credit if you produce 10 imaginative, creative little clothespin peeps. And I remind them that while my grandmother has passed, she was a very dignified Southern lady, and whatever peeps they create, I need to have been able to show them to her without causing her any kind of concern. So if they meet that burden, and that way I keep building up my kit and my repertoire. So that's how I play Who's in the Box. The final activity in my Fab 5 was catch the CS principal's fever.